April 14th, 1945, 2:47 a.m. Silver Hill, Maryland. The headphones press against George Sterling's temples, their leather pads worn thin from 1,000 midnight shifts. Static hisses through the darkness, white noise punctuated by something else, a rhythm. Morse code, faint but unmistakable, bleeding through the electromagnetic spectrum from somewhere across the Atlantic. Sterling's fingers hover over his notepad. In the converted farmhouse that serves as monitoring station, number 1, 23 other operators sit hunched at their receivers, each one tuned to a different frequency. The room smells of burnt coffee and cigarette smoke. Outside, spring rain drums against the tin roof, but inside, the only sounds are the scratch of pencils and the endless whisper of radio waves. You can almost feel the weight of what they're listening for: ghost transmissions from Nazi spy rings, coded messages from U-boats prowling the eastern seaboard, the electromagnetic fingerprints of enemy transmitters that could reveal everything from troop movements to Hitler's breakfast menu. This isn't the war you've seen in movies. No explosions, no charging across beaches, just men and women in dark rooms, pressing headphones to their ears, decoding the invisible battlefield that stretches across the radio spectrum. And tonight, George Sterling is about to intercept a message that will accelerate the end of the Third Reich. The Federal Communications Commission. Yes, the same FCC that regulated your grandmother's radio programs had transformed into one of America's most secret weapons. While Patton's tanks rolled across Europe and Marines raised flags on Pacific islands, the FCC's Radio Intelligence Division was fighting a shadow war that would remain classified for decades. Sterling adjusts his receiver's dial a fraction of a degree. The static shifts, and suddenly the Morse comes through clear as church bells. His pencil flies across the page. Führerbunker to Army Group Vistula. Stop. Berlin defenses critical. Stop. He doesn't know it yet, but he's just intercepted one of the last transmissions from Hitler's bunker. The FCC's invisible soldiers are listening to the Reich die, one radio wave at a time. December 8th, 1941. Washington, D.C. 24 hours after Pearl Harbor, FCC Chairman James Lawrence Fly stands in a room that shouldn't exist. Deep in the basement of the Federal Communications Building, engineers are installing equipment that would make even the military jealous: direction-finding receivers, spectrum analyzers, recording devices that can capture radio signals and play them back for analysis. The transformation had actually begun months earlier, when Fly, a Texas lawyer with the instincts of a spymaster, realized that the FCC controlled something invaluable: the most sophisticated radio monitoring network in the Western Hemisphere. Every licensed radio operator in America, every monitoring station from Maine to California, every piece of spectrum analysis equipment, it all fell under FCC jurisdiction. Gentlemen, Fly tells the assembled engineers and operators, as of this moment, we're not just regulating airwaves, we're weaponizing them. Within weeks, the FCC's peacetime monitoring stations, originally built to track down illegal broadcasters and resolve signal interference, are retrofitted with military-grade equipment. The Radio Intelligence Division is born in absolute secrecy. Congress isn't told. The press isn't told. Even most of the FCC's own employees don't know that their colleagues down the hall are now intelligence operatives. George Sterling, promoted to chief of the RID, oversees the recruitment of an unusual army: ham radio operators from Iowa farms, telegraph operators from Western Union, musicians with perfect pitch who can detect the slightest variations in radio tones, linguists who speak German, Japanese, Italian, math professors who understand the emerging science of cryptanalysis. The numbers are staggering. By spring 1942, the FCC operates 13 primary monitoring stations, 90 auxiliary stations, and has deputized over 600 civilian radio operators as volunteer interceptors. They monitor everything from 10 kHz to 30 MHz, the entire spectrum where enemy communications might hide. You might wonder why the military didn't handle this themselves. The answer is brilliantly simple. The FCC already had the infrastructure, the expertise, and most importantly, the legal authority to monitor any radio transmission in America without a warrant. While the FBI needed probable cause and the military needed congressional approval, the FCC could simply say they were ensuring spectrum compliance. August 23, 942, Amagansett, Long Island. At 3:15 a.m., FCC monitoring station WW2 picks up something unusual, a powerful shortwave transmission originating from somewhere on Long Island. The operator, a two-year-old named Robert Peterson, recognizes the pattern immediately. It's not commercial, it's not military, it's encoded. Peterson reaches for the red phone, a direct line to Sterling's office. Within minutes, 3 FCC direction-finding trucks are racing through the darkness, their rotating antennas hunting for the signal's source like bloodhounds tracking a scent. The trucks triangulate the transmission to a farmhouse near Amagansett Beach, the same beach where, just 2 months earlier, Nazi saboteurs from U-boat U-202 had landed as part of Operation Pastorius. The FBI had caught those saboteurs, but clearly they'd missed something. Inside the farmhouse, German spy George Dash's radio operator is transmitting weather data and ship movements to Berlin. He doesn't hear the FCC trucks pull up. He doesn't see the operators setting up their equipment in the darkness. But in Silver Hill, Maryland, every word he transmits is being recorded on wax cylinders. The FCC doesn't arrest him, that's the FBI's job. Instead, they do something far more valuable. They keep listening. For 6 weeks, they map out the entire Nazi spy network on the eastern seaboard by following the radio trails. Every transmission reveals another node in the network, another frequency, another code. By October, the FCC has identified 16 German agents operating radio transmitters on American soil. But here's where it gets brilliant. Instead of shutting them down, Sterling convinces the FBI to turn several of these stations. The German operators, facing execution for espionage, agree to continue transmitting under FBI supervision. Berlin never knows their network has been compromised. For the rest of the war, the Abwehr Nazi military intelligence receives carefully crafted disinformation from what they believe are their most reliable American sources. D-Day preparations are reported as heading for Calais. Fictional army divisions are tracked moving through Texas. Weather reports are subtly altered to misdirect U-boat operations. November 18th, 1943, Point Reyes, California. The Pacific Monitoring Station sits on a windswept cliff overlooking the ocean. On clear nights, operator Mary Sinclair swears she can see the curvature of the Earth. But tonight, fog has swallowed everything beyond the antenna array, and she's focused on something far more distant: radio traffic from the Japanese home islands, bouncing off the ionosphere from 5,000 miles away. Mary is one of 12 women operating the Point Reyes station. The FCC discovered early in the war that women often had better high-frequency hearing than men, able to detect subtle differences in radio operators' fists, the unique way each person sends Morse code. Mary can identify over 200 individual Japanese radio operators by their transmission style alone. Tonight, she recognizes the operator she calls Butterfly. His dots are always slightly too short, his dashes a fraction too long. Butterfly works at the Yokosuka Naval Base, and when he's on duty, important messages usually follow. The intercept comes through in the JN-25 Naval Code. Combined Fleet Directive, Operation TAR, Philippines Reinforcement. Mary doesn't know what the message means. That's for the cryptanalysts at Pearl Harbor to determine. But she knows it's important because Butterfly only works priority traffic. She marks it urgent and sends it via encrypted teletype to Hawaii. 3 days later, that intercept helps Admiral Halsey position his carriers to devastate the Japanese fleet attempting to reinforce the Philippines. The Battle of the Philippine Sea becomes known as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, the most one-sided carrier battle in history. But the FCC's Pacific operations go far beyond military intelligence. They're also tracking something seemingly mundane but strategically crucial: Japanese weather broadcasts. The Japanese, like all nations, need accurate weather data for their operations, but by 1943, they've lost most of their Pacific weather stations to Allied advances. The FCC discovers that Japanese meteorologists are secretly embedding weather data in propaganda, broadcasts wind speeds hidden in discussions of poetry, barometric pressure coded into music program schedules. Station Joke in Tokyo becomes a goldmine of meteorological intelligence. This weather data proves invaluable. It helps predict kamikaze attack windows. It reveals when Japanese naval forces can and cannot operate. Most importantly, it helps American B-29 crews find the jet stream, those high-altitude rivers of air that can push a bomber to over 500 miles per hour, making them nearly impossible to intercept. February 3rd, 1945, Silver Hill, Maryland. The intercept room has a different energy now. The operators can feel it in the transmissions themselves, desperation seeping through the electromagnetic spectrum. German military radio discipline, once impeccable, is crumbling. George Sterling stands behind a young operator named Thomas Chen, one of the Chinese-American linguists recruited from Berkeley. Chen isn't listening to German transmissions, he's monitoring Soviet radio traffic, legally intercepted as it bounces off the ionosphere. The Soviets are allies, technically, but everyone knows that's a temporary arrangement. "Sir," Chen says, pulling off his headphones, "the Soviets are 40 kilometers from Berlin. This intelligence, which would take days to reach Washington through diplomatic channels, is on Sterling's desk in minutes. But more importantly, it correlates with what the German intercepts are revealing: panic in the Wehrmacht command structure. The FCC has been tracking German military communications for 4 years, and they've become expert at reading between the lines. When units stop responding to roll calls, they've been destroyed. When headquarters suddenly relocate to new frequencies, they're retreating. When encryption discipline breaks down and messages are sent in clear text, the situation is desperate." By late February 1945, the FCC's intercept stations are picking up something unprecedented. German units are arguing with each other on the radio. A Waffen-SS division refuses orders from a Wehrmacht commander. A Luftwaffe squadron leader openly questions the sanity of his mission orders. The Thousand-Year Reich is eating itself alive, and the FCC is documenting every moment. Then comes the intercept that Sterling will remember for the rest of his life. March 19th, 1945, 11:47 p.m. Eastern Time. A transmission from Berlin, barely audible through the atmospheric noise. Nero Befehl. Repeat. Nero Befehl. All infrastructure, all bridges, all factories. Destroy everything. Hitler's Nero decree, the order to destroy all German infrastructure rather than let it fall to the Allies. The FCC intercepts it before most German field commanders receive it. Within hours, Allied psychological warfare units are broadcasting the decree back to German troops, along with commentary, "Your Führer would rather see you starve than admit defeat." April 30th, 1945. Silver Hill, Maryland. The message comes through at 4:23 p.m., encrypted in a code the FCC cracked months ago. It's from Hamburg, relayed through a still-functioning Kriegsmarine transmitter. Der Führer ist tot. Hitler is dead. George Sterling reads the decrypt 3 times before reaching for the secure phone to Washington. The FCC has just scooped the world on one of the biggest stories in history. They'll sit on it, of course. The official announcement won't come for hours. But in this converted farmhouse in Maryland, surrounded by receivers and rotting coffee cups, 24 exhausted Americans know the war in Europe is effectively over. The FCC's Radio Intelligence Division has been operational for exactly 1,240 days. In that time, they've intercepted over 6 million messages. They've identified and neutralized 36 Axis spy rings. They've provided intelligence that saved countless Allied lives and shortened the war by months, possibly years. But here's what makes this story truly remarkable. It almost never happened. In 1940, the FCC was a 7-year-old agency, primarily concerned with assigning radio licenses and preventing stations from interfering with each other. It had no intelligence mandate, no military connections, and no official role in national defense. The transformation of this civilian bureaucracy into an intelligence organization rivaling the OSS happened through sheer improvisation and the vision of a few individuals who understood that in modern warfare, information moves at the speed of light. The numbers tell only part of the story. Yes, the FCC's direction-finding network located 3,000 enemy transmitters. Yes, they provided over 12,000 intelligence reports to military commanders. But the real impact was in the shadows, the U-boats that never found convoys because their weather data was wrong, the German agents who spent the war transmitting false intelligence, the Japanese naval codes that stayed broken because the FCC intercepted every transmission testing new cipher systems. August 14th, 1945, Washington, D.C. VJ Day. As millions celebrate in the streets, George Sterling sits in his empty office, burning files. The Radio Intelligence Division is being disbanded, its existence erased from official records. The FCC will return to regulating broadcasting, and the 4,000 men and women who served in the RID will return to their lives, forbidden to speak of what they did during the war. Sterling pauses over one particular file, a letter from Admiral Nimitz, classified top secret, thanking the FCC for intelligence that contributed materially to our victory in the Pacific. It goes into the burn bag with everything else. The operators at Silver Hill, Point Reyes, and the other monitoring stations are packing up their equipment. The direction-finding trucks are being converted back to civilian use. The massive rhombic antennas that could pick up signals from Berlin and Tokyo are being dismantled. Mary Sinclair, who spent 3 years identifying Japanese radio operators by their fists, returns to her job as a telephone operator in San Francisco. Thomas Chen goes back to graduate school at Berkeley. Robert Peterson, who detected that Nazi spy ring on Long Island, becomes a television engineer in the new industry that the FCC will soon regulate. They take their secrets with them. For 30 years, the FCC's role in World War II remains classified. Even when portions are declassified in the 1,970 seconds, few historians notice. The story of the accountants and engineers who helped win the war by listening to the air doesn't fit the popular narrative of military triumph, but the legacy lives on in ways most people never realize. The FCC's wartime experience transformed electronic intelligence gathering. The techniques they developed for tracking illegal transmitters became the foundation for NSA signals intelligence. The direction-finding networks they built evolved into the GPS system. The spectrum analysis tools they invented enabled everything from cell phones to Wi-Fi. More fundamentally, the FCC proved something that would define the Cold War and beyond. In the age of electronics, the electromagnetic spectrum is a battlefield as real as any beach or forest. Control the airwaves, and you control information. Control information, and you control the war. December 7th, 1991, Arlington National Cemetery. George Sterling is 92 years old, one of the last surviving members of the Radio Intelligence Division's leadership. He's standing at a small memorial service, not an official one, just a gathering of old men and women who once listened to the world end and begin again through headphones and static. Someone has brought a restored BC 348 receiver, the same model they used during the war. They power it up, and for a moment the static fills the air, that familiar hiss that once carried so many secrets. Sterling reaches for the tuning dial, his fingers still steady after all these years. He finds a clear frequency and picks up the microphone. QQ, CQ, CQ, he calls the universal ham radio call for seeking any station. This is W3 FCC, Special Memorial Station, signing off. He releases the transmission key, and the frequency goes silent. Somewhere, perhaps, someone heard that final transmission from the FCC's shadow warriors. But probably not. After all, they were always best at listening, not being heard. The untold story of the FCC in World War II isn't about dramatic battles or famous generals. It's about ordinary Americans who discovered that they could hear the enemy's secrets whispered across the electromagnetic spectrum. They sat in dark rooms, in farmhouses and on cliff tops, pressing headphones to their ears and transcribing the death rattle of fascism one dit and dar at a time. They were clerks and engineers, musicians and linguists, housewives and students. They were never issued medals or featured in newsreels. Their names don't appear on monuments, but for one crucial moment in history, they were the listeners in the dark, and the world turned on what they heard. The static still hisses through the spectrum, carrying new secrets in new wars. But somewhere in that white noise, if you listen carefully enough, you can still hear the echoes of those midnight vigils when the FCC helped save the world, one intercepted transmission at a time.